Welcome to the Twinkle Talks EYFS podcast. Working in the early years is busy, funny, messy, and exhausting. Join me, Shána, some of the Twinkle EYFS team, special guest speakers, and other early years practitioners as we talk honestly about our experiences. Whether you're listening for CPD, on your commute, or to help you relax, Twinkle EYFS will share everything you need to know about all things early years. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Twinkle Talks EYFS podcast with me, Shána. I am very excited to bring to you today a new guest on our early years CPD team. We have the lovely Liz joining Julia and I in a conversation about what behaviour is telling us. Now, I know these are discussions that we have frequently in our early years classrooms and settings about how we support children in not only recognising their feelings and their behaviours, but also how to support others in it too. So we've got the experts in to come and help us do that. So without further ado, let's take it away. Hello, lovely ladies from the early years CPD team.
Hello.
Shána.
We've got a new voice in our podcast today. Who be you?
I'm Liz. I'm on the CPD team as well.
Hey, Liz. How
Hi.
are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I love meeting new friends. Can you tell? Why don't you tell our lovely listeners about yourself and like your experience in early years?
Okay, so I have worked in education for over 20 years now and still work in a school, actually, part of the week. But I was early years lead for 10 years, and during that time had lots of exciting and interesting experiences, which no doubt will be shared by lots of educators all over the world. So yeah, that's me.
We're very lucky to have you sharing your
Yes.
expertise with us. Thank you. And
Thank you.
listeners, just to be clear, as much as we love our new friend Liz, this is not a Lou replacement.
No.
Lou is still with us.
Yeah.
She's
In
just
spirit
very-
today.
She's
Yes,
listening
definitely.
with us. Exactly. So she will be back. Don't worry. We've just added a new friend to the mix. Now, with that, we must have new nickname. Okay, so I was vibing Julibeth. Well, what's the vibe? Julia Elizabeth Julibeth. What do you think?
Sounds good.
I mean, there's not really an alternative, is there?
Lizia.
Lizia.
Lizzie.
That's quite cool too.
Lizia, Julibeth. All
I
right,
mean,
we'll
both
ask
are
the
good.
audience.
Yeah.
We'll see
Take a
what they
vote.
vibe with. All right, and then when Lou comes back, whole other
Ooh.
ball game.
I don't know that I can mix three names in my head. That's beyond my mental
Well,
capacity.
We're gonna have to give it a go. The people want what the people
I'm gonna have to
want,
get the pen and
all right?
paper out to work that.
Good. That's fine. That's okay. Interesting theme we're going to be talking about together today. What does behaviour tell us? Now, we've done a similar episode on this before. I spoke to a wonderful speech and language therapist, Sarah Billingham, and we talked about how different behaviours that children might display in the classroom, especially as they're settling in and they've got speech and language difficulties or needs, can impact on their behavior, and what also the other way around, that behavior is telling us about their speech and language needs, development, etc. Now, I'm really excited to talk with you lovely ladies because we're going to look at it from sort of a more general overall look at behavior in early years, because everybody has behavior, right? And it's our job, especially as early years at the beginning of children's educational journey, to really get to know our children and understand their behavior and what it's telling us.
Yeah.
And we've got two of the best ladies to help us out with that, right? Yes, that you should say yes to
Okay.
that. Yeah. Okay, so let's start from the very beginning. Probably people might think is a silly question, but back to basics, just so we're clear. What is behaviour?
Although it may seem like a very basic question, I think it's so important to discuss what behaviour actually is, because we may all have slightly different interpretations of what it means in practice. And so that's why, although, yeah, it's kind of back to basics, I think that's so valuable to be on the same page. And essentially, behaviour is a form of communication and can be seen as how children respond and react to everything and everyone around them. It's a very open concept, and I think what we do is kind of narrow it sometimes, and it becomes quite negative, like certain behaviours that we look out for. But behaviour is absolutely everything that children are doing in response to the kind of stimulus around them. So if you think about that, then that kind of opens it up. And you can think about all the firsts as well. Children do, like the first time they smile or the first time, they laugh at things. These are behaviours that they're displaying as well. So they can be really positive too, which is a nice way.
I think that's a point you bring up really well, and we spoke about this actually before we started recording. It's when you hear the word behavior, and it's all right because we all do it. We all automatically think of the negative, right? And actually, it's not. But everything is behavior, like you've just said. And we were even talking about like the language that we use around it. Where a few goodness knows how many years back now, when I was still in teaching, the phrases challenging behavior, difficult behavior was used a lot, and we're definitely moving away from that, which is really positive, right?
And if you think about it, like that definition really helps to reframe how you think about children's behavior, because it's saying like, how are they responding to the input? Like,
Yes.
Mm.
what are they giving as an output, rather than saying like, oh, negative, negative, negative. You're like, no, 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 this is a response to what they have just experienced, whether it's at home or whether it's in our setting. I feel like that really helps to understand it.
Yeah, and also having an idea of how you're responding to that behavior
Mm.
as well, which is
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
why I think it's important that we're reframing those phrases. It's actually not challenging behavior. It's behavior you as an educator might find challenging to help or support.
Mm.
Another um
You know how
another
to respond.
yeah, another educator actually might not feel like it's challenging and know what to do. So it's just making sure we're seeing that separation between the behavior as a response, like you say, and how you feel in your confidence to help support and respond. Why is it important to recognize this distinction?
It's important to recognise what behaviour is, as we've said, and there's lots of different types of behaviour. And we do need to remember that behaviour is the primary way that young children express themselves before they develop the means to verbalise and communicate in that way with other people. So that's what they start off to do. And children do display a range of different types of behaviours in their early years. So these behaviours will represent a variety of things. It can be different needs, different emotions, and it can tell you a lot about their stage of development as well. So it's really important to actually, for anybody who works with young children, whether it's caregivers, educators, whoever it is, it's really important that they do have an understanding of the different types of behaviour so that they're able to support the children with their development and, like we were saying before, adapt their own responses. So that depending on what the type of behaviour is that's being displayed, then the educator or the caregiver can adapt their responses in order to best support the needs of that child. So that's why it's really important to have a good understanding of behaviour and what different types. Yeah.
No, I'm really glad you said that. And as well, while you were speaking, I was thinking about, again, trying to not think of all of, oh, yes, adapt to negative behavior, uh, as we used to call it, but also actually any behavior. So, for example, if a child has done something really great and they've achieved something, and then you go in all guns blazing, like, oh my gosh, well done, this is great. And then the poor child's like, oh my goodness, oh my God. And like, and then
It's overwhelming.
it's so overwhelming. They're like,
Yes.
"What on earth is this lady doing? Oh my gosh,"
Yeah.
But then, like you say, recognizing that behavior of, "Okay, what I have done, the way that child has responded, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I
Mm.
need to now adapt my behavior for
Dial it
positive
back.
praise." Yeah,
Yes,
let me chill
exactly.
out. Let me chill it out a bit. Yeah, exactly. So that's a positive thing as well, like, so great. And I suppose as well, it kind of I mean, we all know early years, yes, it's from birth to 5, but a lot can happen, right, in those 5 years. I suppose it also depends on what stage or age that they're at.
Yeah, it can do. Yeah, definitely.
Stages of development is so, so important for understanding children's behaviour, because where they are will really reflect a lot of where you think they might be expected to display these sort of behaviors. So, for example, we were having a discussion about 2-year-olds. You're expecting quite a few tantrums at this age. It's not a huge surprise when they come out. What would be surprising is if they don't get what they want and there's no tantrum.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
I love that. Yeah.
so you see how just by understanding at different ages and different levels of development what kind of behavior you might expect will change how you respond to them. Now, if a 4 or 5-year-old is, doing a lot of tantrums every week, then that might be something that you then respond to in a different way, because it might reflect a different stage of development and something that they're struggling with, or there's inputs that they're, might not be responding to very positively. So you'd see how you reflect on that, on the individual child, reflect on their stage of development and what that means for them, and that really helps to better understand behavior.
And it's important, I think, as well, to distinguish that just because they're at a certain age doesn't necessarily mean they're at a certain stage. We've got this
Exactly. Yeah.
typical level of development, but as we all know, it's that early years is not that straightforward.
No.
Unique child,
No.
all development stages occur in children at different times of their life. And I think actually, if we think about it in the reverse, their behavior is actually a really good indicator to tell us what stage they are, rather than the other way around. Like, oh, well, they should be at this stage, so they should be behaving like this. Well, actually, if we flip it and think of the other way, this child is showing these behaviors, so this tells me they're at this stage. And then you can then think of things to support them at that stage, right?
Clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they respond with this, go ahead, Liz.
No, I was just saying it's just a good guide in a way, just to give you a rough guide of where you're looking. But like you say, it could be that the child is displaying these behaviours and they're not at the age you would expect, and then you might start looking into, well, why? What's going on here? What's the triggers, and what will my response be? So yeah, definitely.
And also, I suppose that we do have to look at the formal admin side. We do have to, like you say, for 2-year-olds, go through a 2-year progress check, things like that. So there are milestones that we need to look out for, right?
Because there's times I feel like in development, and it's always good to take those moments to kind of step back and go, okay, let's take an assessment and let's see where they're at, because then that's how progress for each individual child. You can really use that moment to reflect on their learning later and beforehand to understand where they are. And it's not necessarily saying, oh, well, when I compare them, then this looks better or worse. It's not about that. It's really understanding the child as an individual, and that's the same behavior. It's giving us more information to understand the child better.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think really helped me understand children's behavior, and I was a bit disappointed that this wasn't covered in my PGCE training, is schemas. My nursery nurses told me about this. It was so good. She was like, say for example, if a child in the most loving way just loved ripping up paper, and that was just, it wasn't like a negative behavior. They loved it and they tidy up afterwards, all of this stuff. But I was like, oh, that's an interesting behavior they're displaying. They like tearing things. We've got so many other toys. Why are they why are they not interested in that? And my nursery nurse was like, oh, they're in this schema. And I was like, oh, what's this? Tell us more. So what connection do they have?
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, and schemas are a really great way of actually understanding um, where a child is in their development, because, like you've said yourself, sometimes it can be difficult to understand why a child's behaving in a particular way, especially if, like you say, they appear to be behaving in a way that just doesn't just doesn't seem to be conforming, like if we can use that word, with your expectations in the setting. So it can be really frustrating, especially if you've not come across the term schemas before. But in actual fact, like you said, it is an actual typical aspect of child development, and it can represent a specific stage of development in that child. So scheme, we know what, I'm just going to refresh on quickly what schemas are, just very, very briefly, that they're repeated actions or patterns of behaviour that children focus on while they're playing and exploring, just how they're making sense of the world around them, really. So that's pretty much in a nutshell. So if educators are aware of schemas and that the different schemas that there are, they're going to be able to gain an insight into what that particular stage of development that child is at the moment, and then they can actually target the support for that child. So, for example, we have a child who's picking up building blocks and throwing them across the room. It might appear random. You might be thinking, what's going on here? What on earth's going on? But actually, that child might be displaying elements of the trajectory schema. So if an educator is aware of that, or a caregiver is aware of that, then they can offer support and resources for that child to actually support them in that scheme of learning. So maybe balls or skittles or yo-yos or anything like that, paper aeroplanes. So that would actually support that child at that particular time. So that's why I think an understanding of schema play is really useful to help educators and caregivers just to support the children, and to remember that actually it's not something that you should be worried about or something that should frustrate you, because it can be really frustrating. I've watched children can make a complete mess. I've just literally sat and watched them just pour everything from an area into one big box and thought, oh
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you spend hours
Yes.
setting it all
You're
up,
like,
making it look
"Ah."
amazing, and then within seconds,
I know, it's impressive how quickly it happens.
It is impressive, actually. You do sit there with your mouth open a little bit sometimes, but
the
yeah.
before and after pictures I see on Instagram for me
Yes.
is hilarious.
Yeah. Spot the difference.
I know, when you set up this beautiful area and then in 10 minutes it doesn't look anything like it. But it is actually, if we can reassure ourselves that this is actually a normal stage, and if we can somehow, target that and actually support the child by offering them opportunities to do that in an area, in a place. So yeah, so schema play is really useful. It's a really useful way of understanding behaviour.
Yeah, I think it's so, so valuable. And I've had a lot of those conversations with like parents and caregivers as well. Like, why do they love taking a bag and filling it up and then just going around the house and hiding it from me? And I'm like, yes, I understand why you maybe not want that. Like you've hidden all my important things.
Yeah, or when they hide the keys and hide your phone and things like that. Like,
Oh,
Like
why?
the passport if you're going on holiday the next day.
oh,
Mm.
the amount of parents over the years that have said to me, "Sorry, we're a bit late. I couldn't find my keys." They put him. I found them underneath there.
But again, it's that recognition of actually they're not trying to, frustrate you. It's their way of exploring. And in case you haven't listened already, we have also done a couple of episodes on schemas. So if you want to refresh, or this is new to you, go look at episodes 38 and 41, schemas. But I think then there's a really important distinction, because with schemas, it's showing you the different behaviors children are expressing through curiosity and the way they're exploring the world. Now, children might also display what looks like schema behavior. However, there's usually an emotion attached or a feeling for the child. So there's a very big difference between a child making a mess because that's how they're exploring it, or they're making a mess because they're feeling a very certain type of way. They're feeling frustrated and they do not know how to express it in any other way. That's what we would call dysregulation. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where really tuning in to the child really helps to understand that, because as educators, your children so well. If someone were to maybe walk in, when they do observations or someone comes around, they might not know the difference. They might be like, oh, well, they're just making a huge mess, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, no, they're exploring, or actually they are struggling with something today. And that's where our relationship with children and our tuning into them, we really understand the difference between those.
Yeah, it's really about knowing that difference, because you might accidentally use a response, or you might respond or react to a behavior that's actually just a schema when you've misinterpreted it for dysregulation, and so you
Yeah,
use the wrong tool, or vice versa. You might be thinking, oh, this is just a schema behavior, and actually no, this actually dysregulation, and you need to sort of react in a different way. So it's really important.
and that's where your knowledge of, all early years educators have incredibly deep knowledge of their children, and that's where your knowledge would then be useful, because you would be able to make that that distinction and be able to say, well, actually, no, that child wouldn't normally do that, or they're not going through that.
Mhm.
Therefore,
Yeah.
So, to help our lovely listeners then, what kind of examples per se would you maybe look out for as an educator or caregiver for dysregulated behaviour?
there's one particular example of behaviour can be aggression, which can be quite well, it can be very distressing, can be distressing for the child, obviously, but also for the person supporting that child as well. And it can take, there's two forms mainly of aggression: there's physical and verbal. So your physical, where you might kick or hit or push, and if it's verbal, you might see the tantrums, and you might see the shouting and screaming, calling names, making threats even. So it can be very upsetting. Now there's quite a lot of reasons why a child could be displaying this type of aggression, and again, it's about you understanding your children and knowing what makes them tick, really. So aggression can be it can be on the spur of the moment, so where a child just lashes out, or it could be actually planned, where a child sees a child on the other side of the room and who's got a toy that they want, and they want it, so they go over and push the child over. So that's actually a different type. But there are lots of reasons for it. So it could be that that child is developmentally unable to articulate how they're feeling, and that's how they're expressing themselves at that point. Or it could be external factors. There could be something environmental, something at home, maybe the child's struggling with anxiety, possibly that. It could be that they've have suffered a traumatic experience. So there's all sorts of reasons. It's really hard to unpick it. It is all about having an understanding and knowledge of your child or your children, and knowing what what's something you would normally expect from them and what you wouldn't. And how you respond, well, that's going to be the result of your own understanding of that child and their needs and their triggers. So, there's a variety of ways you can respond to this depending on what you make the decision of is going to be the best way. But there are lots of ways of just being calm. I think being calm is really, really important, and staying calm. And that is so difficult. So
It
difficult.
is, yeah.
Yeah. It's But it is really important because obviously the less calm you are, the more you escalate, the more they will. So it's about remaining calm, helping the child to verbalise a little bit or to express, because if it's born of frustration, and inability to say what you're feeling, then that, supporting them with that will be a good way of supporting aggression. Safe space is always a good thing to do. A safe space for them, but a safe space for everybody else as well, especially if they're likely to be throwing or lashing out in any way. But we also feel that language that is developmentally appropriate, but making it clear that that behaviour isn't something that we accept, and that's not how we deal with things, supporting them to understand that's really tricky. That can be really tricky, and it's not always appropriate. This is something you've got to make the decision of based on your knowledge of your child. You might want to redirect attention to somewhere else, especially if that child has been the one who wanted that toy and has pushed somebody else to get it. So there are a variety of strategies that you can use that depend on what your triggers were and where your child is in their level of development. So yeah, that's aggression, which is, like I say, it's tricky. It's a hard one.
It is a hard one, and I think what I learned in my 10 years, eventually, it took me a long time, was to really try not to take that behaviour that they're displaying personally, because it's
Mhm.
never about you, and you always feel, well, I always used to feel, "Oh, it's me. Why are they doing this to me? What have I done? I'm doing this," and it's like, "No, detach from that. This isn't about me. This is something to do with development." And I think that was a game changer for me, because once I was able to differentiate that, I was able to be a little bit calmer and think and just engage my rational brain a bit more.
And I do feel, with that in mind, that actually a child who does display that to you is because you're their safe person. You're the person that they feel that they can do that to, and they know that you'll push back, but you won't. You will be there for them to support them, and I think that's quite important as well.
And like the same as what you're talking about, also like stepping back, because I think in the moment you focus so much on, oh, well, like why did they not do this XYZ or this activity and what like triggered it, which is important, but also thinking about like actually what's going on for them this week. Like it seemed like this has been quite a big week from them. They've maybe been off for a long time and they've just come in and they're struggling with that, and then you can kind of piece it together a little bit more, because sometimes it's really hard to zoom out again once you've had something like hit, kick, push.
Absolutely. And I think that's where your relationship with the caregivers is so important as well, because, quite often if you've built that positive relationship, but they'll come and tell you, well, we've moved house this week, or there's been a bereavement, or, something that's happened in the family. And then you're more aware, aren't you, then, of how you can support.
And I suppose it's the same for this is like outward displaying behavior, but also I think there are other children who, when they are feeling that kind of way, they also kind of go internal and withdraw as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah,
Is it a
Mhm.
yeah.
similar process?
Yeah, because in a way they're, exactly what it is behavior. They're displaying their difficulty, their dysregulation with the emotions that they're feeling or whatever is going on, but just in a slightly different way by being withdrawn. And maybe that's what they're used to doing at home, or that's been their response, or they find that more comforting. But that's something that a lot of children do, and especially when they're overwhelmed and maybe when they're settling into a new space, you may see a lot of children are quite withdrawn, or they want to go to a quiet space and really get away from it, because let's be honest, it is very overwhelming when you start a new setting. There's a lot of children in a small
Yeah.
space sometimes. Like it's overwhelming for
Yeah.
us too. So imagine if
Mm.
you've got a really quiet home, you come into that. It's a lot to take. So yeah, it's definitely just another way of displaying them dealing with that, coping with that, and also could suggest again kind of just a desire for their own personal space, as well as maybe some sort of sadness or anxiety they could be expressing as well. It really depends on, again, like what time of the year it is. When we were saying, oh, when you know your children, you'll say actually they're not usually like that. So that might be a flag to you to be like, oh, I wonder what's going on with them if they're not typically like that. But if it's at the beginning of the year when you're settling, then that might be more typical and expected. So again, it kind of, you'll know best what it's reflecting. And I think that you'll get to know those kind of needs and triggers once you see them, depending on their stage of development. But kind of providing those safe and quiet spaces is so important for all children. Like we all need that downtime anyway. And providing kind of emotional literacy kind of materials to help understand their emotions better, because it's really hard. There are
Yeah.
adults that cannot do this.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, emotions
Exactly.
and feelings are big. They're so,
Mm.
so big. So it's a real challenge, and I think we always have to remember that when we're seeing the behavior that is challenging for us to deal with, we have to remember that these feelings are really big, and they're a challenge. So what can be nice as well is also having smaller interactions if those big ones are really overwhelming, and also stories around emotions that can really normalize it for them, because if they've never spoken about emotions at home and they just find it really overwhelming, then stories are a really lovely way to explore different emotions together and kind of model that behavior of like,
I think it's also important to also recognize that, like, a lot of things physically go on when you have emotions, and that also might be a trigger. So, for example, they might have felt a certain way and maybe it didn't bother them, and then their behavior hadn't changed yet. But then they're starting to feel all these weird things, like if they're feeling stressed or anxious, like, oh,
feel it in
my
your
tummy,
body.
yeah, like my tummy feels weird. Hang on, I feel a bit dizzy. And they're probably not going to have a clue what's going on. And then their behavior changes. And it's actually about, and that's why it's so important to teach children about their emotions, not just how they think or feel, but how it physically feels in their stomach
Mm. Yeah,
or in
exactly.
any parts of their body, because you never know that just that confusion might have been the trigger, the trigger for the change in behavior. And once they then understand that, that actually might help with the regulation, right? What about, right? I've been talking to my friends. This is a fun one because quite a few of my friends have children in early years, right? And I was talking to one the other day, and it's not that their child is anxious or feeling frustrated. They just say no.
But that's
Oh, should
just a
we?
fun phase.
It's a great
No, no,
phase.
no, no.
Literally,
It's
like,
a great phase.
what do you do with that?
Along with why, that's another one.
Oh
Why,
yeah,
why,
that's
why?
that's
Well,
that's a
yes,
good phase too.
absolutely. Well, we call that defiance. So yes, so when a child displays defiance, they may say no. Yes, they may be doing the stamping the feet. They could be using the body language, is like they're shaking the fist or folding their arms across the chest and doing that expression. You know, we've all seen it.
You see it
You know,
now.
so yeah, yes. So yeah, I mean, yes, it is a normal stage, a typical stage of child development, and of course, if you did get to a point where the child was older and maybe, in theory, if we're going off this stages of development model, if they're gone past that, then you might start looking into other things that it might be a result of. But we do have to accept that having this defiant stage is a normal stage of development. It could be, the result of the child's inability to self-regulate. So they're struggling to express and to actually regulate their own behaviours and their own emotions, which is a huge thing to learn for a young child. And they need a lot of support with that. But there could also be external factors as well. So we do have to be mindful that we need to look beyond sometimes the developmental aspects and just think, are there other environmental factors going on? Is there something going on at home that we should know about, we don't know about? But in some cases, also, a child may have a diagnosable disorder, which it has happened. It's called oppositional defiance. So that can actually be diagnosed in some cases. I mean, so we do just have to be mindful of the fact that defiance can be a result of different things, and it's not always just the stage they're going through. But again, this is where your own knowledge of your child will come in, and you'll be able to make that decision yourself as to whether you think it is developmental, in which case we just support them through it until they reach the end of the stage, or if it's something a little bit more. But there are lots of ways we can support any child that's displaying defiance, no matter what the causes are. Really, you're going to be thinking about maybe making instructions that you give really clear and easy to understand, very simple, so that you're not going to escalate a defiant situation. You're going to think about breaking down any requests you have into small steps. At first we're going to do this, and then first next, and then really important, I think, in learning how to develop in this way to actually overcome defiance is to model. I think children will watch other people to see how to behave, and they will. I mean, we all know that as early years educators, it's crucial to model behaviour. So how to respectfully disagree with somebody, maybe, and maybe to offer a different opinion in a sensitive way. So if children can see you doing that, maybe with other adults, maybe in the setting that you're in, that could go a long way to helping them to actually manage their own feelings when they want to say no, or they don't want to do something, or they don't agree with somebody else, which is a common thing.
I think as well, not on like the flip side of that, but related. I always thought as well it was really important to teach children like it's okay to say no, as well as like not just being the defiant no, 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 that's no thanks. But also it was the whole, yes, of course it's important to learn to share and play with others, but actually if they had a preference and they just didn't want to participate in something or didn't want to, it's okay. But it's how to say no.
Yes, it is. It is, and yeah, and that's where your modelling will come in, and you're working in a group with children and doing it together. And yeah, they do need to see that actually it's okay to say no. We just need to consider how we're doing it, and thinking about considerations of other children. I mean, empathy is a really difficult emotion to develop, and children around this age are just, coming into sort of, age four-ish, coming into that idea of that other people have feelings,
Yeah,
and
that was our
and
concept.
yes, exactly. We actually need to consider that.
And also they're learning what they like and don't like, and it's okay
Yeah,
to
the
express
process.
Yeah,
and not like
yes,
things that their
Yeah,
friends
yeah,
might like. So
yeah,
absolutely.
it's a melting pot of things,
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
so
yeah.
no
It's
wonder it's hard to regulate, you know?
And
it
Oh,
again,
really is.
yeah, it's something that sometimes we as adults struggle with. There's a whole thing about, oh, learning to say no. It's hard because at some point, maybe when we were younger, we were told not to say no and that no wasn't okay. Maybe. We don't know. But no, sometimes there's many adults that can't say no to anything, and then it's to our own detriment as well. So it's about like what you're.
Absolutely, and to offer a different opinion, about something again, when I was little, it was, you do as you're told.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
listen to
Yeah.
authority figures, yeah, you can't disagree, it's rude. And, we've got to learn that actually you can, but there's just a way of doing it, that actually considers everybody. So it's really hard. It's like you say, a lot of adults struggle with that. Yeah, definitely.
and like on that thread of, considering everyone, your role as an educator is not, and caregiver of course, is not just to support that child who's going through this dysregulation, but sometimes that dysregulation can affect others and then become disruptive. So you've got to get that balance as well between supporting that child who's obviously in this crisis state, but also the other children that you're caring for. Like that that's quite a challenge when it becomes disruptive.
It is, and I think that's often why we use the word challenge, because when there's behavior like this, you almost want 10 supporting adults to be like, okay, so I want to come with you and talk about your dysregulation. And then obviously we need almost adults to help support the ones that have been affected as well.
Yes.
Because it is, it's
Mm,
hard to do everything at once
yeah.
and also be very in tune with the children and stay calm and all of these sorts of things. This is why another reason why early years education is such a challenging job. It is such a challenging job because you're dealing with so much. And sometimes disruptive behavior can also be a response of inconsistent routines or boundaries at home, because we're usually very consistent in settings, and they kind of get to know what to expect, and you can see that they respond really well to that because it's nice to know what to expect. Often we have
Yes, it
routines too and
is.
we like them. We
Mhm,
like having
mhm.
boundaries as well, and when those get crossed or routines or things change, it's difficult. It's sometimes hard to know what to do. And if they're at home waking up at lots of different times or rushing to school at different times or your setting, then that will make it have an impact on them as well.
There's, I mean, you guys know, there's disruptions. Even when in our earliest settings, we set up a lovely routine, right? Things come up. That's just life. For example, a fire drill.
Yeah. Oh, those are fun, aren't they? They're not
Oh,
Oh,
those
very stimulating at
wonderful.
all.
I know, it's totally, look, and of course they're super important, right? But that is an example of a disruption that might trigger dysregulation in children and adults, not naming any names.
No, they stress me out too, and I'd always have a big discussion with them, being like, "So this is going to happen today because it's a loud noise. It's a very loud noise." And honestly, if you'd never had one of those before, would you know what to do? There's like, everyone, adults as well, they're always like, "Don't panic." And you're like, because my initial response is to panic. Okay, good. Like it's a lot. It's a lot. So yeah, well, it's always good to talk about it. Disruption can also happen because they might not be engaged in the learning environment. And you might notice this if children, for example, maybe they are getting a lot of stimulation at home and there's some things that they've perhaps already engaged with a lot, and they're not engaged with what you've got, or there's an interest that they've got and nothing is there that they're curious about in your learning environment. And there also may be developmental differences, or they're actually just looking for more care and really want a response from you. So there's so many reasons as well that they may be disrupting. So again, I feel like we might become a bit of a broken record, but every child is different and you know them best. But
yes, true though.
it's very hard to say like a one size fits all, because that's never the case.
No, it never is. And I think an extra layer that always made me, this was what I lost sleep over when I was in education, and I'm sure a lot of other educators feel the same, is when safeguarding then gets involved, and the behavior is like that extreme, that then safeguarding then becomes your priority, and that is the bit that I really struggled with, if I'm honest, and that was what I needed help with. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
what say
because it's a
you?
big
Help, guys.
responsibility. Well, honestly, it's huge. Safeguarding is such a huge part of our job. We see children for such a huge amount of time as well. And I think that's so significant because if you think about it, like they're spending a lot of their time with us. And so we see a lot, and that the behavior can also indicate things at home. There can be signs of abuse, for example, signs of neglect. And it's really important that we know those signs really, really well so that we're able to note them down and follow the safeguarding policy and tell your DSL and things like that. Because sometimes behaviors and safeguarding, there's no difference sometimes between what they indicate. So it's really important to understand what they look like so that we're really aware. Because it's really important. And we need to be able to keep children safe.
It is. It's just having that awareness that actually there could be something going on beyond what you would be normally thinking from that behaviour. So yeah, it's really important, and it is hard.
Yeah, and again, we're not just talking about like extreme behavior, because again, that can be an indicator of safeguarding, but it's any behavior change. That was what got me. So it's like perhaps a child was usually really talkative and all of this, and then all of a sudden withdraws. And that's when my heart used to go, and I used to go, oh, this a safeguarding issue? Uh, so it's not necessarily always about the extreme behavior. It's about knowing your children really well, and then just noticing a change, and whatever change that might be is safeguarding involved here. So that was another thing. So thank you, lovely ladies.
Oh, I think there's just one last thing I just wanted to say, actually, if
Please
that's
tell
okay.
me. Of course it is.
Well, it's about actually the educators and caregivers. I think it's really, really important that the educators and caregivers look after themselves as well. You know, it can be so stressful, it can be so exhausting to actually support children who are dysregulated. So it's just keep an eye on yourself and your own mental health, and be kind to yourself. That's really what I just wanted to say.
Good, and that's really important as well. And also, we haven't even touched on it yet, but again, I think it's important to recognize is if you need help in this, that's okay. Like, it's not the expectation that you should just, oh well, deal with all of it. You should know you're an early years educator. Like, there are people out there, hopefully within your own settings and teams, to support you, like the SLT teams or the SEND teams or behavior teams, or there's so many people that will welcome you to be like, yeah, okay, let me see if my expertise can help in this way.
Yeah,
It's,
definitely.
it's a lot to be dealing with. All of the children's emotions are a lot to take on, and it's hard not to take them on. So yeah, definitely, like it says, look after yourself as well. It's very important.
Okay, well, we've been talking about behaviors and supporting children's, regulation, etc. We usually end our episode with a game, but I thought we'd do a little show and tell, a little share and care, little, for the end instead. So I wanted to ask you guys what things, because as adults, we also need help with regulation and behaviors. It's a lifelong lesson, right? What tools do you use to help you regulate yourself? Mine has changed recently. I've just got a puppy. And as much as she dysregulates me because, oh my Christ, I've got to teach her how to use the potty and all of this stuff, I've found that actually she's really good at regulating me. And we
Aww.
just have a little cut. 'Cause yesterday I was quite overwhelmed with work and whatever. We all have those days. And she just came over and sat on my lap and we had a little cuddle. And I was like, oh. So I'm quite lucky. And if anyone else has pets and things, I'm sure they get it as well. My pet is a wonderful regulation tool. Not that she's a tool, you know what I mean? But we love her.
Oh, bless her.
I think actually it's yoga, because they really sounds really ridiculous, but it really reminds me to breathe because I feel like you don't realise when you're dysregulated how shallow you're breathing, or that you're just not breathing deeply. And I feel like it makes such a difference when I go to a class and then they say kind of just breathe through your nose and like do like kind of belly breath, and you're like, I feel so much calmer than I did 5 minutes ago. And it's such a small thing. It's so important. Just breathing. I feel like really relaxes me. And tea.
Oh,
Drink
tea.
more.
We love a good tea. Tea solves everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Have a brew,
Oh,
have a
Getting
tea and cake.
outside as well. I feel like getting in some nature was always helpful for me.
me and my National
Oh,
Trust
yeah.
site.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how me and my partner and now Sadie, little puppy,
Ah,
go and just
Oh,
unwind and just go and
yeah.
go outside. It's
Fully
lovely.
relax, I
yeah,
feel
I
like
love the
this.
garden. I love gardening. That just
Mm.
really grounds me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Same,
Shána
Liz.
loves gardening.
Gardening friend.
I'm not brilliant
Yay!
at it, but
Neither am I. But it's fine. So, all right. You know what? Let's wrap this episode up because me and Liz gotta go talk about some gardening stuff.
Yeah, well, I need a garden to be part of this conversation.
Oh no,
oh.
Julia, we will not. No, inclusion. We will get some plant pots and stuff.
Inclusion.
Inclu-
Love
Inclusivity.
that.
You are still involved. Yeah.
My
Thanks.
windowsill.
Your windowsill. I love. Yeah, let's do it. Thank you so much, lovely ladies, for
Well,
sharing
thank
your
you,
expertise
Shána.
Oh, thank
today.
you.
It's been super valuable, and I know it's going to help a lot of educators. So thank you so much. Have a
Oh,
Oh,
lovely
thank you, Liz,
day,
for having
whatever
me.
you're
thank
doing.
you. Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Gardening. Yeah, gardening.
Yes.
And I'll see you all
Have a
very
lovely
soon.
day. See you
Yes.
soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Julia and Liz, for that really insightful episode. I hope everyone took a lot from it and also enjoyed it as well. If there's anything that you would like us to talk about, or you have a follow up from this episode that you would like us to feature in another episode, do let us know and get in contact. You know where to find us. If you follow the podcast description, you will find all of our social media channels. Get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Until the next episode, have a great day. Bye bye. So that's it for today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you would like to join in or would like to know more, then come and find us on our social media sites. We have a Facebook page, Facebook groups, an Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. All the links of where to find us will be in our podcast description. Come and join the conversation. And whatever you're doing today, I hope you have a great day.